So thank you all for joining us to honor David Forman and to celebrate his book, Legal Actions for Future Generations, which he co-edited with Professor Emilie Gaillard. We are delighted to host this book launch event and also to recognize David and Emilie's tremendous work and their impactful book. Legal Actions for Future Generations is interdisciplinary. It examines not only the legal implications for unborn future generations, but also scientific, sociological, and philosophical developments. In addition to authoring chapters themselves, David and Emilie included essays contributed by highly regarded authors who explore notable global successes and some failures. Among other things, Legal Actions for Future Generations considers the nuclear industry, climate change, rights of nature, the movement towards a human right to the environment, and also transhumanism, also known as artificial intelligence. The book is inspired by the landmark 1993 case of Miners Oposa versus Facturan, which was decided by the Philippine Supreme Court. Given the numerous questions one must consider when discussing and analyzing legal actions for future generations, we have a dynamic and energized event planned for you. We will hear from the co-authors and a number of other luminaries as well. So without further delay, I want to turn the virtual microphone over. I understand that our former Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Professor Denise Antolini, will speak next and will introduce some of our guests. Aloha to you all, and thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations, David.
Thank you, Dean Nelson. It's a pleasure to join you in this, like you said, a reunion and a celebration. This is an extremely happy moment for all of us, and I'm trying not to cry on David's behalf. So it's so good to see everybody. Let me carry out my official duties. My name is Denise Antolini, and as the Dean said, I'm the former Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, but my real role today is as a dear friend and colleague of David Forman. David stepped into my dusty, muddy old shoes as director of the Environmental Law Program. I'll introduce him more later. But it's a great honor and thrill to be a little bit of a host at the beginning of this really fun, dynamic, exciting program. So I have the pleasure of introducing three dear friends, and we're going to go on a global adventure here. And this is part of the theme of David's new life and the book, right? Because the book is a product of this big global family that a lot of us are now part of. And you're going to see these interweaving threads and relationships and stories. And I'll start with Justice Antonio Benjamin. So I'll give a very quick introduction here, so to make sure that he has plenty of time to speak for himself. Justice Benjamin is a very distinguished member of the High Court in Brazil, the STJ. And we have had the pleasure of working together for the last 4+ years as Justice Benjamin is the chair, and I have served as the deputy chair of the World Commission on Environmental Law of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which is the world's oldest and largest network of conservation organizations, including countries. And the World Commission on Environmental Law is one of the 6 expert commissions that is an extraordinary global network of lawyers who are interested in the development of the law. And Antonio, my dear friend Antonio, has been a fantastic leader of the World Commission for the last 8 years, and importantly has had a wonderful role in developing our international connections at the law school. And this book is one of the byproducts of that extraordinary effort. So without further ado, my dear friend, and thank you for staying up so late, Antonio, to join us for this special event. It's in your good hands.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. It is really a great pleasure to join this celebration. It's not a personal celebration of the work of David Forman and Emilie Gaillard, but it is a celebration of the legal community of Hawaii, France, and the world. The topic couldn't be more important: future generations. We can barely think about the present generations. We tend to forget the past generations and imagine looking to the future without any boundaries. So this is physically almost impossible, but it is possible in legal terms to translate the idea of the future and put it in a legal framework and take not just intellectual pleasure from that, but take practical benefits from this legal concept that was developed collectively by many people around the world. And they did it in the 80s and 90s, some of them without knowing that the others were doing the same. So this happened, for example, with the pioneer that we are also celebrating here, a friend, a brother, Tonio Posa. When he brought this case that is analyzed and cited by the book that we are launching here today, when he brought this case, he was not aware that Edith Weiss had written a book on future generations in the environmental context. So the world has become much smaller since then, and now we can connect by video with extraordinary quality. We are much closer. But unfortunately, in looking to the future, we still are faced with enormous difficulties at the present. And not just difficulties that affect the present generation, but also difficulties that will affect tremendously future generations and might be an impediment for the quality of life of future generations. So, in conclusion, I would like to thank David and Emilie for putting together this fantastic book, but also to thank a few people that are heroes before what we see here. First of all, Professor Denise Antolini. She is the best gift Hawaii has given me, the World Commission on Environmental Law, and environmental law. But this best gift came with the blessing of someone that I like very much and admire very much, the then dean of the law school, Professor Avi Soifer, that I see here. So Avi, many thanks for accepting this sharing endeavor of your dean, Denise Antolini, with not just me, but with the world. And we are very proud of the work that Denise has done, is doing, and will continue doing. I would like also to recognize the presence here of one of the graduates, not from just the law school, but from WCL, Miranda Steele, that I see Miranda, at least I saw her a second ago. Miranda Steele has been the executive officer for quite some time. And imagine having to cope with Professor Denise Antolini and with Justice Antonio Benjamin. That's not an easy combination of people demanding, but also recognizing the value that is put, the energy that is put by dedicated people. My very last words are for the two co-authors. They are also children of the World Commission on Environmental Law. We are all children, and that's the good thing. We never grow up within the World Commission on Environmental Law. And we can't grow up because environmental law is permanently exploring new horizons, new challenge, and facing those difficulties that are put before us, not just the legal community, but the courts as well. So, David, Emilie, I don't know, because now it's so late in France that Emilie is probably not connected. Congratulations to both of you. I admire so much your work, and I wish you the best in your career. You have probably noticed that I try to dress properly for this occasion. This is a shirt that was a gift from my brother and friend, Justice Michael Wilson. And whenever he sees me, he says, "Are you wearing in fact, I have more than one shirt given by him. So make sure that you tell him that I was wearing one of the shirts that he gave me." So congratulations again to the two co-authors, David in particular, to the law school, and to the legal community of Hawaii.
Thank you, Justice Bennett. And Justice Wilson heard you because he's here.
Aloha, Justice Benjamin. I'm very grateful that you wore that flamboyant shirt that, of course, is more flamboyant than your usual understated personality.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the, the most discreet one that he has given me.
Oh, so you can see how fun this family is. So we have this wonderful ohana that Justice Wilson and Justice Benjamin and David and I, and now Richard and Emilie Gaskin, Miranda Steed, the ELP is really enmeshed in this global net that has been so well designed and set by Justice Antonio Benjamin over many years, and by several of the co-authors of the book. You will meet some of the other instrumental people. And the next one I'm going to introduce is one of those most remarkable people in our extended international ohana. So Lisa, I see you there. I'm going to give you an introduction. The World Commission on Environmental Law many years ago created a sister organization, which is the Iucn Academy of Environmental Law. And Nicholas Robinson, who I hope you'll meet in a few minutes from PACE, played an instrumental part in that creation. The Academy, as Lisa will describe, is a global network of environmental law programs and scholars at law schools around the globe. And we have been very honored, the environmental law program has been honored to be part of the Academy for many years. It has provided us an incredible scholarly connection and collegial connection. And I think David will probably mention the instrumental role that the annual colloquia held by the Academy played in the creation story for this book. So we go from Justice Benjamin, who has led the Iucn Commission on Environmental Law, to the leader of our sister organization, Lisa Osorio, who is a professor at the University of Cebu School of Law, beaming in from the Philippines. Aloha, Lisa, it's all yours.
Thank you, Denise. Good morning, everyone, and greetings from the Philippines, which is actually now celebrating and remembering the 25th year of the People Power Revolution. So when David invited me to this event, I said, it's actually a holiday today, but yes, I would be very much willing to be here and celebrate with you this book. So this book, The Legal Action for Future Generations, as I understand, was inspired by a landmark case also in the Philippines in 1993, where the court allowed minors opposa standing to sue for the benefit of present and future generations. And so I'd like to really congratulate David Forman and Emilie Gaillard, whom I actually met a few years ago for the first time in Hawaii during the World Conservation Congress. And she started talking about how she was inspired by the case in the Philippines with her PhD work on future generations. And David, of course, I've met a few years also ago when we were both coaches for the International Environmental Moot Court competition in Florida. So happy to know that this book is going to be a valuable publication that will inspire the network of environmental law professors and researchers around the world. As you all know, the Iucn Academy of Environmental Law, as Denise mentioned, is a network of over 200 environmental law institutions and research centers around the world working on environmental law and research and advancing it so that it will benefit our global community. And so this publication is precisely the kind of work that will inspire environmental law professors and researchers all over the world, and certainly here in the Philippines, where we are also fraught with a lot of challenges, environmental challenges and political challenges. And I'm sure not only in the Philippines, but in other parts of the world, this book can be an inspiring resource for us to think about and use in some of the battles that we are facing with. And so thank you so much to David Forman and Emilie Gaillard, and congratulations on behalf of the Iucn Academy of Environmental Law.
Thank you, Lisa, and so wonderful to see you. We've had such wonderful times together, and that despite COVID, they haven't ended. We're just all meet on Zoom, right? Before I introduce Tony, who is on WhatsApp, I do want to acknowledge two of my fellow faculty members who have played a major role in the environmental law program from the first days, and that's Professor David Callies, who's there listening, and Professor Casey Lee, formerly Jarman, who was the official founder of the environmental law program. In the early years, they had the foresight to get this program off the ground. And I don't know if they ever would have thought that we would have something like this with people beaming in from all around the world, and you know, successive rings and layers of faculty and friends and alumni and partners. And it's really an extraordinary effort that they planted the seed for way back in the late 1980s. So thank you for being here. I see so many other colleagues. We can't acknowledge them all, but now I have the impossible task of introducing Tony Aposa. So Antonio A. Aposa Jr. is, it's hard to embarrass him because there's no superlative that's too big for Tony. Tony is a dear friend of ours, and that is largely due to David Forman. So David, I'm sure, will fill in the story, as will Tony. We had the pleasure of hosting Tony at the law school as an in-a-way chair. Oh, I'm forgetting the year now. It seems like it was 6, 7 years ago. Okay, thank you, David. 2000, anyway, 6 years ago, I think. Tony came to Hawaii and visited us for 3 months, but if you know Tony, you know he doesn't sit still. So he didn't actually sit in Hawaii for 3 months. He was always doing things. He was making connections. And one of the most memorable connections for me that he made was with Justice Antonio Benjamin. He was the one who said, Denise, you need to talk to Antonio, and that led to a visit by Antonio as our visiting jurist in residence, which led to all these other things. Tony, when he came, broke all the rules, which he absolutely delighted in doing. And he is such an inspiration to us, both for his legal work, his cutting edge thinking, his leadership, his music, and the joy that he brings to this field of law. So to my dear friend, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you on WhatsApp, beaming in. And can you hear us, Tony?
Tony, can you hear everybody? We see you. I need to, there we go.
you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I want to greet you. Tahimik mo na. I want to greet you from the Philippines like my dear friend Lisa Osorio, but I will also let the mountains of the Philippines greet you. Can you see it from here? Can you see the mountains there?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Can you
Beautiful.
see the mountains there?
You're in Tagaytay?
Yes, that is. No, it is in Magallanes, Cavite, where we are building a mountain counterpart of the sea camp. First, let me thank my dear. She's not my friend. She's not just a colleague. She is actually my sister, my spirit sister. I call her, in fact, Sister C, Denise Antolini. You will hear more about her shortly. And my brother from even 10,000 miles away, and he also my tokayo, meaning same names, Antonio Benjamin, and my dear friend and longtime colleague and fellow lover of the sea, Lisa Osorio. And all of you, my dear friends in Hawaii and all over the world, greetings, not from me, but from the mountains. Let me tell you a story. Through the daughter of a former law professor, Leo Kisumbing, I connected with a fellow island dweller from the island of Hawaii. We connected by email. And then when the good and the great John Van Dyke moved on from his life, no, he did not pass on, he just moved on. A memorial event was held in his honor and memory in Hawaii. I happened to be there with a dear friend, Woodzeki, and then I met in person a long-lost friend and long-lost spirit brother. And by the way, not just a spirit brother, he's also a blood brother because his mother is full Filipina, David Forman. 1 year later, and Nick Robinson, the living legend called Nick Robinson, visited me in the sea camp in the little island in the central Philippines. Beautiful island, tropical, there was a hammock, beautiful, there were even dancing fish. But little did David know that during one of those evenings, he actually had the chance and actually joined a real hands-on direct enforcement action against commercial illegal fishing. My friends, he did not know, but he joined. He did not know it first that he was so surprised that in the midnight, there was a seaborne raid, seaborne enforcement operation together with a team, fully armed with Armalites and even rocket launchers. And he was the first Filipino to ever join the enforcement actions of the legendary Visayan Sea Squadron. Ladies and gentlemen, please let me hear you give a round of applause to David Forman. Yeah! We will have peace on earth when we have peace with the earth. And that is what David did in the Visayan Sea. David, please show the film Peace with the Earth. Hello? Finished?
Not quite, almost. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Tony.
So we will have peace on earth when we have peace with the earth. That's a simple message. And because David went through a very thrilling midnight seaborne raid, he gave a happy and very generous payback. David Yamamoto and Denise Antolini invited me to be their teaching assistant in the spring of 2015. So there we were. We were even planting vegetables right in the courtyard of the University of Hawaii Law School. When you go visit them one day, you will see, oh, these are the plants the vegetables that they planted there. Okay, so when we were there, good use of our time, what a beautiful location, what a beautiful privilege to be in Hawaii. So, with the help of Wonder Woman Denise Antolini and David Forman, we organized 12 people from around the world. Great thinkers and great movers like Nick Robinson of New York, Victor Tafur of Colombia, Matt Pawa, the foremost pioneer climate litigation expert of the United States, Catherine Pierce of Europe, Alisa Joel of the Center for International Environmental Law, and with us was also the former Chief Justice of the Philippine Supreme Court, June Davide, the writer of the children's case that inspired this legal action for future generations. Once again, this would not have been possible without the help of my sister C. She helped us find a beautiful, beautiful beachfront house in the North Shore of Hawaii, Oahu. There, beside the sea, beside the surf, with this handful of committed and thoughtful men and women got together in very informal but very happy company. There, by the sea, with a few bottles of beer, they held what is commonly known as a workshop. But my friends, you know what? I never work. So instead, we held a play shop, not a workshop, but a play shop. Thank you, and I would like to encourage all of you to please stop working and start playing. Life is about play, it is not about work. Thank you again to my dear sister C, Denise Antolini, for finding us that beautiful, beautiful house. And David and Mike Wilson, I call him Mike Wilson even if he is now Justice of the Supreme Court, but he is our spirit brother. We even had a swimming party in his home. And thank you, my dear David, Denise, and Mike for those wonderful moments that we live on and on. And what did they do there? They just swim, they got together and they concocted and conspired to do a legal mischief, a global legal mischief. They conspired to sue the whole world. No, to sue the whole world before the highest court of the world, the International Court of Justice. And they were not going to sue something. Denise Antolini is an expert in legal action, but they were not going to sue it. They were planning not to sue the world in an adversarial, confrontational manner. Instead, they were just going to simply ask a question, a request for an advisory opinion to the International Court of Justice on the simple question. The question is, quote, in the face of the climate crisis, what are the duties of states to future generations? Simple question. Again, in the face of the climate crisis, what must states do? States, remember, are bonus pater familia. In Latin, they're known as bonus pater familia. They are the good father of the family of humankind. What are their roles? What are their duties to future generations? And that future generations, my friend, is not about me. It's about you. And you know what? This was 2015. But these people are so committed. David Forman, Nick Robinson, Victor Tafur, and my spirit, because she could not join us, Denise, they got together in New York, September 24th, 2019, less than 2 years ago. And they said, we will do it. Together, they pursued the idea. And together on September 24, 2019, please remember this date, my friends, because these people actually went to the United Nations headquarters in New York. Can you believe that? And then there they filed a petition to start a revolution. What is a legal? It will be a legal revolution. And a revolution does not mean violence. It can be a peaceful revolution. And it is only a simple question. My friends, they say that if you want to be heard, tell the story. If you want to touch the heart, sing a song. If you want to start a revolution, even a peaceful revolution of the mind and of the heart, to revolve, meaning to turn around the mind and the heart. If you want to start a revolution, ask a question. And the question is simple. Do you, my dear young friends listening today, do you and your children deserve the kind of earth that we, my generation, is leaving behind? I do not have the answer. Let's hear the International Court of Justice. And the seed was planted. No, they did not create news on CNN, they did not create news on Fox News, but they planted quietly a seed. The seed. We congratulate, and I say we, on behalf of like-hearted people around the world. My friends all around the world, Africa, Oceania, Europe, Asia, Latin America, North America, on behalf of all like-hearted, not like-minded, like-hearted people around the world, we sincerely and heartily congratulate Emilie Gaillard and David Forman and the authors for putting this book together. Legal Actions for Future Generations. My friends, may I repeat, it's not a book, it is a story. It is a story, and it is not about us. It is not about the authors. It is about you, because you will be here 1, 2 more generations after that. So what? You ask, so what does a legal action do? What can it do? I mean, we just have an advisory opinion, etc., piece of paper, etc., etc. And as my friend Denise Antolini only knows too well when she initiated the case to clean up the Wahoo, the Waikiki legal action. Please take note of this, my dear friends, because I cannot have share screen because I'm up here in the mountain. Please take note of this in your pieces of paper. A legal action can light a star. S-T-A-R. What's a star? It can light the star of hope. S-T-A-R. Number 1, it tells a story. It tells a story. In the case of the children's case, for example, it tells a story that children of 30 years ago, and you too, have a right to clean air, water, and land. It tells a story, a simple story. Number 2, T. What's T? It puts the issues on the table for proper and orderly discussion backed by evidence. If we quarreled in the Congress, or we quarreled on social media, or we argued on the streets, nothing will happen. But in a court of law, we can present evidence that this is happening. Whether or not you will listen, that's up to you. And that brings us to number 3, A. Action. Somehow or other, a legal action will spark a real on-the-ground action. When a say, a public official who allows the dirty Waikiki beach when he receives a subpoena from the court that asking him why is he not cleaning it, then the very least, my friends, he is going to jump from his seat. It will spark action somehow, one way or the other. And you know what? Stars sometimes align. And what you wish sometimes happens. And number 4, R. STAR. Story, table, action, and R is resolution. One way or another, sooner or later, win or lose, it does not matter. But if we argued in the street, if we argued on social media, we will get nowhere. But somehow or other, a legal action, even a non-adversarial, non-confrontational legal action, will get to a resolution. My dear friends, especially those of you, the younger generations who we have worked a generation or so ago, worked for, thank you for your gift of kindness to make peace with the earth. David, please play the gift of kindness. My friends, please read it aloud. Please read it aloud to yourself.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, everybody, and I'm glad the technology worked, at least for almost all of you. And again, greetings from the mountains and from the sea. And I'm so happy, even if I cannot, I'm so happy to see and hear the wisdom again of my dear brother, Tocayo Antonio Benjamin, all the way from Brasilia. And to see my spirit sister, Denise Antolini, and Lisa Osorio, and of course, my dear brother David Forman. By the way, before I forget, that in that United Nations petition that was filed in September 19, the Hawaii played a key role. There was a representative from Oceania, Shannon Peters. There was a representative from Asia, Tarini Mehta, the only child of the legendary MC Mehta, and Nicole Ponce, and yes, who it was. I hope she's listening, Miranda Steed. And so Hawaii was there represented. Now, Mark Paranal, I hope you're listening. Please tell them about the Good Stories movement, and that part of the legal action for future generations, along the lines of it, we are looking for good stories, not just of the law, but of good stories of people making peace with the earth. And Mark can tell you more about it, and by email we'll get in touch. Aloha, thank you, and if Mike Wilson is not around, please send my regards to him, Brother Mike, and we hope to swim in his sea one day.
Brother, I am here, Brother Antonio. I have heard you.
Foreman and Emilie Gaillard.
Thank you, Tony. Denise, back to you.
Thank you, Tony. So as I mentioned, Tony is a dear friend who loves to break all the rules, and we love him for it, right? So us as lawyers, as law professors, as scholars, you can see how inspired we are. So can't thank him enough for providing that live tribute to David, from Tony's heart to our heart. And my next job, I think my last job for today, is to give a very quick introduction to David Forman. And, you know, I wrote and wrote and wrote pages and pages and pages with footnotes about how extraordinary David is. But then I reduced it to a couple of words and some slides. So a couple of words and then a couple of slides with hardly any words. One is, I really want to acknowledge his family, and I see family members there. What an extraordinary family, the Foreman family that I've known for a long time. David, and this is how you get a book done, right? The foundation that his family gave him is really amazing. And we could have a whole series of Zoom seminars on how amazing his family is, and the strength and the resilience that it gave him. And I thought if there's 3 Hawaiian words I wanted to share when I think about David and his background. Onipa'a, steadfast. Steadfast. Leadership in the family is so strong, and it's deep and it's broad and it's just extraordinary. Ha'a, humble. A family that knows the value of humility has taught David that, not perhaps by lectures, but by modeling it. And ha'a shows this, that humility is a powerful value. And last, Laulima, his family is exemplary for working together, for getting things done together, even when it's incredibly difficult. So I just wanted to start with that because it's so important. David is who he is because of his family. Professionally, I thought I would read every line of his resume, if that's okay with you. That would take us several days. No, we won't do that. Graduated from Richardson in 1993, took advantage of every opportunity, one of our earliest graduates of the environmental law program. I won't go into all of the extraordinary things he did, but because of his years of practice after he graduated as an ocean policy consultant, as a law clerk for Justice Klein with the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, the Hawaii Appleseed Public Interest Law Center with Alston, Hunt, Floyd, and Ng, and the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. All of that, many, many years of practice. When I became associate dean and Casey and I were doing succession planning, which is part of Future Generations, we called on David to come step into our shoes at the environmental law program, and he did. And that extraordinary journey started in 2011 and has lasted to present. And I'm so proud that David is our director and has helped take the program global, as you can see. And now I have a 1-minute slideshow to talk a little bit about David on a more personal level. So if I can, I'm going to try to share screen here. Just give me 1 minute. And I will make this short and hopefully sweet. So let's see if I can get to the first slide there. Okay, as I always ask my students, give it 1 second there. Come on, are you seeing the first slide? Okay, all right, thanks. So short tribute to David Forman, our ELP worker bee and global pollinator. And this ties into a lot of the themes that Tony touched upon. So this is a celebration of the book launch of David and his co-author, but particularly David, because David doesn't get enough credit for all the amazing things that he does. So very quick story about Ma'ohauhele. It is a federally listed endangered species. It is a hibiscus. It is our state flower officially since 1988, and it is an endangered species. And it is an ELP gift that keeps on giving. When Casey Jarman left the environmental law program, one of our gifts to her was an actual plant, Ma'ohauhele, which we gave to her at a celebration at the Hawaii Aquarium, which we were legally allowed to give because it was had a permit. It's an extraordinary flower. That plant grew and grew and grew in the yard of Suzanne Marinelli, a good dear friend of ours, even after Casey left. It blew over in a storm. Suzanne gave me cuttings, and on my property where Justice Benjamin and Justice Wilson and Tony Oposa and so many others have visited and planted trees here. This hibiscus has gone through several generations and generated incredible blossoms. And now comes the story of David. And David, your gift from me to celebrate the book is going to be a cutting from this hibiscus that has been passed down from Casey to Suzanne to me and now soon to you. And I wanted to show you this evolution of David's work on the book. He finds the flower, Emilie Gaillard, his co-author through this journey. He lands on the flower and he thinks this is going to be a lot of work, but he has to go for it because the opportunity to do this kind of work is extraordinary. He explores all the complications and the allure of the flower, recognizing both the good fortune and the challenges of this project. He goes in and does an incredible amount of work over the last several years. And that's David. David works himself to death for the good of others, for the good of our community, and emerges with pollen that then he spreads around to so many others, both here in Hawaii and around the world. And that's just my quick little visual romp to show you that all these things are connected and that David has given us a beautiful gift that keeps on giving. So mahalo, David, for doing everything you've done. I barely scratched the surface, but I'm going to turn it back to you to lead us into an introduction to the book.
Thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody that has come, all the people that have spoken so far. You know who you are. I'm not going to take the time to do that. I swear that we had planned to keep this to an hour. Obviously, we're not going to do that. I want everybody to be comfortable. If you need to leave, including my ELP RAs who only plan to be here and administer my slides until 5:05. They may need to leave early, and so we'll just adjust. But I did want to introduce my co-author, the co-editor, the primary editor, and this book is really, her brainchild. I was just a visitor in the process. I was grateful to be invited to be part of the scientific committee when she submitted the very first proposal to Region Normandy. And she's written her dissertation on future generations. And when she wrote this, all of the law professors that in France were very dismissive of the work that she did, and said that this was not important work to do and she should change her topic, and she stuck to her guns. And really, it's an award-winning, the Prix Prize winning book that she's published as a result of that. And so, most of the authors that are participated in this book are because she chose them. I reached out to some folks that she asked me to, and we'll introduce you to them later today. But if we can share, please, the recorded message from Professor Gaillard.
Hello to everybody. I'm Emilie Gaillard, Professor of Law at Sciences Po Rennes in Normandy and the General Coordinator of the Normandy Chair for Peace. I would like to warmly thank today Professor David Forman from the University of Hawaii, who coordinated with me this book, which is the proceedings of an international symposium organized here in Normandy with the label of Normandy World Peace Forum. In this book, we studied many ways of defending future generations, because this is a new paradigm in law. I would like to warmly thank Professor Foreman for his involvement, which means, because of the difference of time zone, working up to 4 a.m. for him or 2 a.m. for me, and we managed to do it. So thank you very much for organizing this event today. We wish you a marvelous lunch. You will be introduced to many of the authors who contributed to this book, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all. Hello from Normandy with another temperature. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you, Emilie. So we're going to forge on, and anybody that needs to leave, please do. But we're recording this, and it's going to be posted on the Normandy Chair for Peace website. And so if you need to leave and you really want to see what you missed out on, please, we'll provide that information to you later. And some folks have asked me about how to purchase the book, and somebody, one of the ELP RAs will provide that. And I wanted to be sure that I thank them. They work very hard. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without them, not to mention the force of nature and the force for nature that is former Dean and Professor Denise Antolini. I've told many people that I don't think I want this job if she's not in this job. So come talk to me in 2 years if she's not actually here. So if we could go to the slides, and before we started, I just want to acknowledge the foreword to the book is written by Dick Ottinger. He's a former representative and drafted some of the energy laws in Hawaii, and he was having lunch with a friend, and Emilie joined in and just happened to he said something about, well, you're going to Hawaii, so I thought you two should meet. And next thing you know, she reveals to him that she wrote this dissertation, and then he reaches out to me, and I said, of course, we need to involve her in the first Oposa Moot Court. And she was an expert consultant, commentator, and then a judge, and she also brought a student and filled out our 6 teams. So I'm going to briefly describe the collection, and then I'm going to introduce some of the authors if they're still with us. I think Alan was up at 3 a.m. in Prague, but I don't see him on the participant list right now. And then if you can go to the next slide, please. And so this is, I just wanted to briefly introduce to you the Normandy Chair for Peace. And Emilie is largely responsible for this. She did all the work in getting Region Normandy to adopt these proposals. And Normandy wants to position itself as, the equivalent of Davos is for economics. It's Normandy as the city of peace. And so they host the World Peace Forum there, where we've brought some of our students over the years. And this is the mission. And if you could give me the next slide. We're going to skip over a video I can share with you at another time, but Tony also has a video about land, air, and water, and it talks about the vision of the program. But if we can go to the NCP collection, in the chat you can see the website for Normandy Chair for Peace, and it'll become clearer to you. But Tony was actually named the chair of the Normandy Chair for Peace, and he wasn't able to attend. I didn't realize this was going to happen, but Pascal Bouillon, I hope he's listening, really gracious person that's in charge of not only Maison Recherche in Humane Sciences at Humanes, but also the head of research program for all of France's universities. He had me seated right behind all the Nobel Prize winners, like I was a VIP. It was really incredible. And not only that, as Tom can tell you, I had an issue with my Achilles tendon, and so Pascal took me to his own doctor and then sent me up with a specialist in France who deals with all of France's top athletes. So if my performance improves, I owe it to Pascal. Next slide, please. So this is the four of us, Tony, Nick, Professor Gaillard, and myself, and we have created this Normandy Chair for Peace collection, and this book is the first in the series in that collection. Next slide. And so we have a distinguished group of folks that are advisors, and some of you will recognize the names that are up there because they've been here. You know, Professor Breaker, who was just named Deputy for Environmental Justice in the Biden administration, and a whole host of experts. Next slide. So we really hope that those folks will come back and we can get others to visit and share their wisdom directly with our students and the rest of the community, while also showcasing to them what Hawaii has to offer, both substantively and for the soul. Next slide. So I mentioned this already. We can jump ahead to the next slide in a minute, but earlier this month, I took Zoomers on a whirlwind tour of the footnotes of the Public Access Shoreline Hawaii decision during the UH Law Review Symposium. And today, I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour of the chapters in the book, introducing you to the authors and describing what they wrote about. So the next slide, please. The book is broken down into 6 parts, as you can see here, and Dean Nelson graciously described many of these topics, so I can jump right into our next part 1. And Mireille Delmont-Marty opens the book on the next slide, and she talks about the entry into the Anthropocene area, calling for an urgent Copernican revolution. She calls for establishing a new matrix. And she really looks at, this is a woman who is elected professor of the most prestigious research institution in France and is taught all over the world. She talks about ordering pluralism that's sustained by differences. And she uses a wind compass to generate that idea, to give you an image of what she's talking about, recognizing the complexity of the issues that we deal with as a necessity to regulate all of those complexities. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves lost in the doldrums. And you'll see in my chapter that I picked up on the themes that she spoke about. Edith Brown Weiss is a legend in terms of the rights of future generation. I mean, I couldn't do justice to what she means to the development of this intergenerational equity framework. And she speaks, she lays out that framework and highlights how it's deeply rooted in diverse cultural and religious traditions, and recognizes that we all share, all generations share in a planetary trust. Professor Robinson, who Nick spoke about already, I had the privilege of greeting him, being the first person to greet him at the Cebu Mactan Airport before we delivered some lectures together. And Nick is a founder of Environmental Law Program in New York, and is also has a former chair of the World Commission on Environmental Law, and also headed up the Iucn Academy of Environmental Law. And I've always been trying to get more law schools involved, and it was partly due to Tony that I finally realized how meaningful it would be to get involved with Nick. And so he talks about the Onondaga Nation and looking 7 generations forward. And so that's another theme that we picked up on later. So next slide, please. Sorry, I should have shared this slide with you earlier. And those are the 3 authors that I just introduced you to. So we can go to the next slide. And I am not sure, did Alan Weir stay with us, or did he join us? It doesn't look like it. So I will just introduce him. Alan Weir, and if you can put in the chat box the information about Alan. He's a Right Livelihood Award winner, which is pretty impressive. He has done tremendous work in the community. He was a teacher initially, and then he, excuse me, sorry. He writes about the ICJ and the People's Tribunal case, and he talks about the temporal nature of international humanitarian law and about nuclear weapons use as a crime under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. You can go to the next slide as well. I'll talk about each of these authors, but Jean-Marie Collin is, well, sorry, I should have mentioned as well about Alan that he works with the Parliamentarians for Non-Nuclear Proliferation and is really actively involved. That group is going to be recognized next month for Youth Fusion Awards, kind of connecting elder generations with the younger generations. Jean-Marie Collin is a member of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. And he talks about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Frédéric Lemarchand is a sociologist who is an expert in catastrophism, and he identifies all kinds of conceptual paradoxes and lists 10 commandments focusing on moral responsibilities to future generations. And he brings a number of famous French philosophers to English audiences. And then we have Dr. Martin Walter and Professor Andreas Nidecker, who are distinguished members of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, which also received the Nobel Prize Award in 1985. And I believe we have a video of a recorded message from Dr. Walter, if somebody could play that, please.
My name is Martin Walter. First, I would like to thank Emilie Gaillard and David Forman for inviting me to the launch of the book Legal Actions for Future Generations, which they served as editors. I'm proud to have contributed, together with Andreas Nidecker, a chapter of the book to draw attention to the consequences of the nuclear industry for the health and to preserve the genetic heritage of humans, animals, and plants. And not only did the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki brought suffering from ionizing radiation, but the generation of electricity in nuclear power plants also brings suffering from uranium mining, the production of nuclear fuel, the so-called reprocessing of spent fuel, and not solved disposal of nuclear waste. Not only big nuclear accidents, but also their fallout of even low doses of ionizing isotopes causes mutations in the most important heritage of mankind, the genome, but also in the genetic code of animals and plants. Genome damage has been shown by molecular, biological, and phenotypic methods in many scientific publications. The official scientific bodies such as the International Commission on Radiological Protection, the ICRP, and the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, the UNSCIR, do not fully agree with our use. Nevertheless, we advocate better protection from ionizing radiation. We have used examples of humans, barn swallows, butterflies, as well as trees in a chapter of your book to show how the damage is done and what the health consequences may be for future generations. We are completely convinced that the nuclear age must be ended. We advocate this cause on behalf of the Swiss affiliate of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Walter. It's really fascinating, demonstrating the interdisciplinary nature of this book, the scientific research that they've presented. It was a little bit of a challenge as an editor to negotiate the translation of scientific writing into our book, but Dr. Walter and Professor Niedecker were very gracious in that regard. So we thank them for their contribution. So maybe if we can go to the next slide, please. And the pictures that you were seeing earlier were from the symposium. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about the expanding professional networks that were made possible here. And Alan Ware is on the left, and the gentleman between the two of us is Andre. He's the creator of the Prague Peace Trail. So you can Google that. And so I had the honor of being guided by the person who created that Peace Trail. Frederic Lemarchand is a jazz musician, plays the string bass in addition to be a sailor. And then Jean-Marie Collin and Eli Brown and Emily and I, she took us on a tour of the coast, and you can see Arromanches in the back there. Next slide, please. Okay, so part 3. Christian Uglo is an incredible attorney. He litigated the Amoco Cadiz oil spill off the coast of Brittany, along with international pollution cases of the Mediterranean, the Rhine, and the Moselle rivers, as well as the Bay of Seine. I went to a party in his honor in Paris, and he basically stopped everything and made me the center of attention, profusely thanking me for the American legal system that allowed him to get the damages award in the Amoco Cadiz oil spill, and basically financed his subsequent litigation. So it was a bit overwhelming, particularly since I didn't speak French and everybody had to translate for me, but it was quite an experience. He talks about examples of global warming cases brought into national courts, and that the area of climate justice requires thinking outside of the box. And he also talks a little bit about the Our Children's Trust litigation, which is the subject of the next chapter. And I think I saw John Davidson earlier, who's a professor and was an expert in that case. If he's still with us, I would invite him. I'm going to take a quick look at yes, he's here. John, are you still connected? If you would like to say a few words, you'd be welcome to. Otherwise, we have a message from Julia Olson. So Eli Brown and Danny Noonan are former attorneys with Our Children's Trust. Danny spoke at the French launch that was held last week, Friday, and we can put a link to that. If anybody speaks French, they can join in there. But why don't we go to the recording from Julie Olson, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia Olson. I'm the Executive Director of Our Children's Trust, and I lead the Juliana versus United States litigation with my amazing co-counsel Phil Gregory and Andrea Rogers. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but just wanted to give a shout out to Emily and David for their fabulous work putting the book together. And Our Children's Trust is really thankful to be able to be a part and contribute the chapter on securing the legal right to a healthy atmosphere and stable climate for the benefit of all present and future generations. I want to thank our former colleagues Eli Brown and Danny Noonan, and our longtime friend John Davidson for the work that they contributed to that chapter. The chapter really lays out why climate change is the most pressing issue of our time. It's a human rights issue, and it walks through a bit of the history on the public trust doctrine as a framework for the legal obligations of government to address the climate crisis, and then really highlights the Juliana versus United States litigation as an example of the kinds of cases that we can bring. And since it's not covered in the chapter itself, just a quick update that since the 2016 ruling that where a US court for the first time held, and I think any global court held, that the right to a climate system that sustains life is fundamental and part of our core human rights. We then went through a long and winding path to a decision in the Court of Appeals in January of 2020. It was a split decision, 2-1, that the youth don't have standing to bring the case because in the majority's view, the court can't do anything, can't even interpret the law and issue a declaratory relief. That opinion for now is standing because the Ninth Circuit decided not to rehear the case en banc, and so the youth are now petitioning the US Supreme Court for review with a petition due on July 12th. So that's where we stand. There's always the possibility that the Biden administration could agree to come to the settlement table, and we hope that they will. And meanwhile, I wish you all well, much success in all your endeavors to protect the climate. And our Children's Trust is here and ready to dig in and work with everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.
Wow, what a treat to have Julia Olson here with us. We actually are hoping that we might be able to convince her to join us for the April 9 ELP conference celebrating our 30th anniversary. But like magic, the ELPRAs seem to have highlighted for me on my screen John Davidson with something in his background that somewhat resembles Mireille de Montmartry's wind compass. And so if he wanted to say something, he would be welcome to. He might have declined earlier when I couldn't see him, but go ahead, John.
Can you hear my audio right now?
Yes.
I have been lucky to be able to work with our Children's Trust sometime, and I haven't been deeply involved in the litigation. My work for the last 20 or so years has centered around the attempt to locate intergenerational rights in the US Constitution. And I've been guided by that a lot by Edith Brown Weiss's work and Thomas Jefferson, oddly enough. And people would be surprised at how much the revolutionaries in France and the United States from back in the 1700s had to say about intergenerational justice issues that we're really only getting a hold on right now. Right now I'm working on some more articles and hopefully a book on that topic, and would be happy to learn from and share what I know with anybody who's interested in the constitutional dimensions of future generations' rights. Thank you guys so much for putting this book together and all your other ongoing work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Professor Davidson. We genuinely appreciate your commitment to that litigation. I've read some of the transcripts and some of your expert testimony, and it's very meaningful. And I know that it had a great deal with the initial successes of that case, and I hope that it will have continuing impact, whether on the US Supreme Court or in other proceedings. So thank you again for your commitment to that effort.
Thank
much
you.
appreciated. If we could have the next slide, please. And so this is what, when I was describing the podium, I wasn't joking. You know, this is what it looked like at the symposium. And the person who's speaking with the microphone is Agnès Michelot. And Agnès was also, in addition, a coach of the team from France that participated in our 6th intergenerational moot court, which was held virtually in December. And we had Justice Torres, who had to leave, but Justice Wilson also participated in that event. But Professor Michelot at University of La Rochelle is also the head of the French Association for Environmental Law, and was a rapporteur on climate justice reports to the French Economic, Social, and Economic Council, as well as the European Economic and Social Committee, along with CNRS Director Dr. Jean Giselle. And she writes about French and international perspectives on climate justice. And I really do commend to all of you the way that the French are dealing with these issues is really progressive. And I'm really proud to have been involved in bringing some of that French work to English-speaking audiences. So she talks about dignity as a basis for the right of future generations to ecological integrity. Also speaks about the principle of non-regression, which Justice Wilson knows a little something about. And then the principle of ecological solidarity as well. Next slide, please. And so, you know, this is, I think, the end of day one. One of the people here, the tallest gentleman here is Serge Gallagher, who's with Klimatzak, and you know, some of the other climate justice work. Next slide, please. Okay, and just you know, it was Emilie took us out, and we had Moot Courts and other wonderful things on the coast. It was really a fantastic experience. Next slide. Okay, so we're now at the next part 4, and I would like to say next. We'll go to the next slide, please. So we have some of the authors here. And I had my notes to accurately pronounce Marie-Angèle Hermite's name appropriately, which I've just butchered, but I can't find my notes, so sorry about that, Marie. But she wrote a piece. She's the Emeritus Director of Research at CNRS and has deeply influenced French thought on countless major issues of our time. She speaks about rights of nature. So I know Representative Ganaden, if he's paying attention, he might want to read this chapter of the book along with the next chapter. She talks about entering a new area described by new forms of legal animism, indigenous, spiritual, and scientific inspirations, and also talks about the judicial evolution in which rights of nature and rights of future generations are converging. Matthias Patel is a PhD candidate. He identifies the philosophical, economic, and legal contours of this paradigm shift by granting legal personhood to nature. He also talks about ecological justice and the need to respect ecological limits. On the right, also at that same lunch with Ellie and Emilie, is attorney Juan Ignacio Pereira from Argentina. So he delivered his presentation in Spanish, and so he and I had a lot of fun editing his piece into English. But he testified about the harmful effects of pesticides in Argentina at the International Monsanto Tribunal before the UN Human Rights Council. His article acknowledges the positive influence of international law on Argentina's adoption of constitutional provisions and national legislation respecting rights of future generations. And he provides an inventory of the progress on those new rights under his work. The next chapter, if we can go to stop sharing briefly, and we can I'll briefly describe my chapter, which identifies links between Native Hawaiian cultural values and the intergenerational equity legal framework. After 50 years of genetically modified seed in Hawaii, local efforts to regulate those practices failed after the companies successfully removed the litigation from state to federal courts. And I hope Miranda will explain a little bit about her efforts to make me sound intelligent to people in France. But I also exposed gaps in the federal, state, and local law that are part of the coordinated framework for biotechnology regulation, and criticized the Ninth Circuit for failing to certify fundamental state law questions involving county public trust obligations to the Hawaii Supreme Court. But you heard Tony Aposa mention Miranda Steed, who's a former ELP research associate, and she has not only helped me anticipate and address potential issues with literal translations of English into French, she was also actively involved in the third Aposa Intergenerational Moot Court that was held in Brazil. And she participated in the conferences that were there, as well as the fourth Moot Court. Maybe she'll say a little bit more of that. She went on to get an LLM from Elizabeth Howe Pace Law School, where Professor Robinson teaches. And so if I can, if she is still with us, would Miranda please join us? Is she still here?
Yeah, I am still here.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think first you just wanted me to briefly say something in French.
It's up to you.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we have anyone here who speaks French still, since it's so late in France, but I was just going to, je souhaite la bienvenue à nos collègues français. Cette collaboration a commencé il y a des années et nous espérons que la publication de ce livre marquera le début de notre collaboration. Nous sommes particulièrement heureux du lancement de Normandy pour la paix et de son travail pour les droits des générations futures. Yeah, I guess I'll just briefly speak about my involvement. When I was a first-year law student, I got hired at the end of my first year to work for the environmental law program. And I was excited because I thought I was going to be organizing events and working with local attorneys, which I did do. But all of a sudden, I was asked if I could start doing some translation on a book, well, I didn't know it was a book project at this point in time, but on a project in France. And that turned into me going to France my second year, not just once, but twice, with Professor Foreman to work on this project. And in the process, I really jumped into the deep end with comparative law because I learned quickly that federal common law and civil unitary systems are very, very different. So in Professor Foreman's book chapter, there's a huge issue with local preemption of ordinances regarding pesticide regulation. And that doesn't exactly translate into French because there's not really the same concept of preemption in French law. And so one of the first things I had to figure out was how to actually translate this so that it was understood by a French audience, because the word preemption actually does translate, but it's a different legal theory there. So that was like the first hurdle that we overcame translating it. But in the process, you know, we found a lot of synergies between the problems here locally in Hawaii and the problems overseas as well, because I think that this issue with especially larger corporations coming in and wanting to do things like test pesticide resistant plants is something that we're seeing a problem with all over the world. And so there's a lot of idea and knowledge sharing that went on, and it was exciting being there to actually look at the different language and legal barriers and getting that knowledge sharing to happen. But, you know, it has, and I think that the culmination of the publication of this book shows that it's been a success. And then I also will just touch briefly on, I did get to work on the Moot Courts, which were named after Tony Oposa, who spoke earlier. And the first one I was a participant in, that was on granting personhood to rivers, to bodies of water in Brazil. The second one was on geoengineering, and that was back in Caen in France. And I both helped the Hawaii team with that one. I also worked on, again, translating, because again, the same issue of translating legal concepts is a bit complicated, but there's a, I think, large positive impact that comes from it, because there's a lot of positive knowledge sharing that goes back and forth. And just in sort of as an aside, that I think Professor Foreman wanted me to mention is a lot of unique opportunities arise when we have these types of collaborations. And one such opportunity, Michel Prieur, who he's going to speak about next, was at the fourth Moot Court in Caen. And he was actually working on a treaty, a proposed treaty on the rights of climate refugees at this time, and needed some help translating it from French to English. Because I was there and I was translating, he asked if I could do it, and so I did. And this ended up opening up a dialogue between him, professors at University of Hawaii, that you know, helped open up a broader dialogue on what the rights of climate refugees are and open up more perspectives on it. So there's a huge ripple of impact, as Tony Oposa would say, not just, you know, in terms of getting this book publication, which in and of itself is a major feat out, but also of just increasing our own knowledge and connections in the push forward to combat the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Miranda. I really appreciate that. I think Miranda has probably set records for miles traveled by a law student for academic purposes. And I mentioned that she also had her LLM at pace. And it was just too bad that COVID happened. I know that she had lots of terrific, fantastic opportunities that were cut short because of the circumstances there, but we're lucky to have her back. She's practicing personal injury law now. So, send all your cases to her. Thanks, Miranda. And I also wanted to make sure that we not only acknowledge, Miranda also helped me with a chapter that I'm going to talk about at the end, helping cut down some of Tony's submission at the last minute, the night before we were going to deliver it. And so she really embodied the spirit that I've tried to follow, is basically contrary to Nancy Reagan, we just say yes, when people ask us to chip in. And Denise talked about that a little bit as well. But I also wanted her as a representative Next Generation, and I'll have two more at the end if people are willing to stick around. And I'm amazed that so many have stuck around so far. But if we could go to the next slide, please. Miranda had mentioned Michel Prieur. Stay on that side. Sorry, back one more. I apologize. So Michel Prieur he created the French Society for International Law and its Environmental Law Review. He's also the president of the International Center for Comparative Environmental Law, which has special consultative status at the United Nations and the United Nations Environment Assembly. And he talks about efforts to change the current drafting efforts, including a draft third international covenant on the human right to a healthy environment, as well as, which has been deposited with the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And he actually gave us permission to print the document in our book. So that's an incredible resource. Next slide, please. And in this chapter, last but not least, certainly is Corinne Lepage, who is attorney and former French Minister of the Environment. She writes with Professor Gaillard about the draft Universal Declaration on the Rights and Duties of Humankind, and furthering this evolution in human rights, which I alluded to, that's being worked on very actively in France, and it would extend the rights of humanity to future generations. So very important works that she has done and continues to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are at part 5. Judge Bick, who's also the president of the International Commission of Bioethics. We can go to the next slide, and I'll describe the other authors. He's on the left. On my left, I guess. He describes posthumanism. This is the transhumanism work that Dean Nelson alluded to, and he's got a little bit more permissive take on this, talking about improving human capacity and the paradigm shifting techno-scientific changes that are going on. And he characterizes this artificial intelligence, human enhancement, as a political question. Whereas Professor Vandelac, who's University of Quebec and co-editor-in-chief of the Vertigo, which is the first francophone scientific journal in environmental sciences, she's more critical about the transhumanism. And she views it as a form of anthropocide that goes along with ecocide, and that it's represented by the intertwined climate, biodiversity, energy, resources, health, and fertility crises. And so she thinks that talking about these issues sap limited time, resources, and collective imagination that should be focused on our current problems. Dr. Amandine Cayol, who's a lecturer at the University of Caen, also a winner of the Dupin Prize for her book analyzing work contracts under tort law principles. She and Professor Gaillard write about a further critique of transhumanist ideology as an echo of Nazi ideology. And she calls for a new legal humanism, starting with global recognition of crimes against the human species as a principle of human dignity for future generations. So next slide, please. That brings us to the last part. Professor Gaillard has a piece in that, as well as myself and Tony Oposa. The sixth part, Emilie references several symposium presentations. And next slide, please. we weren't able to incorporate these individuals' presentations into the books, but so she describes those, and I'll share it with you briefly, as well as discussing transgenerational damage, in its multiple phases, dual, systemic, transtemporal, and transspatial, and draws upon her award-winning dissertation, which is written in French, and so you have a translation available to you here. Next slide, please. And of course, when I do that, I lose my notes, but good thing I wrote this chapter. And so I have the opportunity here to introduce Tony Oposa. And you heard from him already, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but his story is truly incredible. We almost lost him in a fire. He was in a coma for a month. And he's my kuya. My older brother, and he has quite literally put his life on the line in service of marine resources in the Philippines. That's the Visayan Sea Squadron, and his good friend Elpidio de la Pida was killed, and Tony luckily was able to survive that. But maybe we can just go straight to the next slide, and I can just share with you a poem from Tony. And maybe you can just put a link, if that's possible, in the chat for the video that Tony had shared, A Gift of Kindness. But this is Tony's artwork, as well as his own poem. And so he really is focused on wanting to make a difference, and that's what the book is about. Trying to make a difference. So at this point, I'd like to go to the next slide. Well, I just really thank everybody, but I feel compelled, and particularly since they're still awake. Can we go to the next slide? I'd like to talk a little bit, just for the benefit of the French audience. I'm trying to track down my French roots. And ironically, given Nick Robinson's talk about the Onondaga Nation looking 7 generations ahead, in Hawaii, it's Kawamamua, Kawamahope, right? So we look at the 7 generations past. And with regard to France, these are my connections to France. And I'm hoping that somebody in the audience will help me connect to some of my relatives. I didn't realize this until recently, the connection to the Bro family. I was a Sea Grant Fellow with a senator from Louisiana named Bro, spelled with an X, but that's a variant. So I'm trying to track him down as well and see if there's any connection there. But the next slide, please, because it all starts really here. And so if this just explains why I love to do what I love to do. And it's because of these two. And this is in the home that I grew up in. I'm sorry, but the cute kid up on the wall is not me. That is my older brother, Bark. And I'd also like to acknowledge him because I couldn't have done any of this work without him. Mark has, gone out of his way, to be there through the evenings, nights and days. We've got night nurses now, and he calls me when he needed help. I've done more during COVID than I did before, but I really couldn't have done any of this without Mark. Next slide, please. And so also, here are some of my cousins from the Philippines, and my cousin Leah's daughters, Michaela and Alyssa, with her husband. And there's Neil and Carla. Carla would be here from Kauai if not for COVID, providing support to our family. And so I just want to acknowledge all my cousins in the Philippines for being there for all of us. And then next slide, please. I have to acknowledge John Van Dyke. Tony talked about, I like to think that John was smiling down on us when he passed away, and he made the connection possible with Tony. John was, I didn't expect to get emotional here. John passed away unexpectedly in 2011, and he was my biggest supporter as as a potential faculty member at the law school. And so if any of my faculty specialists are in the audience, my peeps, I'm with you. We'll get those restorative justice issues of our own addressed eventually. But John and Casey were I was a TA for them in the summer after my first year. And I was doing research, and I fully expected to be a footnote in the article that I was working on for them. And next thing I know, it's published with me as the lead author. And then I worked on a paper with Senator Bro, and I published that in the Law Review. And then I worked on a paper with Professor Ron Brown on focusing on the Philippines, because we didn't have any classes on Philippine law. And so I did it in his comparative labor law class, and I published that thanks to efforts of my Tita Baby, my mother's younger sister, who helped me gather all of that information. But Casey Jarman is the founder of ELP, and we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. She joined us for one of our trivia nights. I hope some of you will join us for our trivia nights as well. They were a ton of fun. She is really largely responsible for, people thank me sometimes for the work I did for Justice Klein as the author of the Public Access Shoreline Hawaii decision. It was all what I learned from Casey that enabled that decision to happen. And it wouldn't have happened if not for Casey Jarman. And I'm being entirely honest there. If I had not learned the lessons from her, Hawaii wouldn't have that decision. As you can probably tell if you read the Kapai decision, which was her dissent in the Land Use Commission, and then was adopted by the Hawaii Supreme Court. But Casey, if she's still here or watches this in the future, just know that I love you very much, and we're looking forward to connecting with you again in the future. And then one more slide, please, before I hand off the microphone again. Eric Yamamoto. I knew John Van Dyke was at the law school. That was one of the reasons, along with John Craven, that I decided to go to attend Richardson, because of my interest in ocean policy. But then I met Eric Yamamoto while I was at the law school. And any law student that has been through Richardson understands what that's all about. And I had the good fortune of being one of his inaugural scholar advocates. And Casey does a similar thing. The thing I forgot to mention about Casey is her commitment to the community and public service, which is something that we try to get our students to emulate in her honor, but also for the benefit of our community. But Eric, not only during law school, but afterward, gave me so many opportunities to write, whether it was on amicus briefs, whether it was on a paper that he was working on, collaborations with other colleagues. If Susan is still here, she and I have written, we started writing together because of Eric, and write publishing reports for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Eric is just an incredible, not only a mentor, but a friend, and I'm really proud to call him a colleague. And so he's got a couple of books out and working on a third right now. So you should, I'm sorry I don't have them to put in the chat. But I've gone for far too long. I talked a little bit about Kawamamua. I want to go to Kawamahope now. And so I just want to share with you a little bit. We mentioned Andreas Niederker, one of the authors of one of our chapters, and Tony talked about the I Am Climate Justice movement, or ICJ movement. Professor Niederker is the founder of the Basie Award. And one of the winners of the Basie Plus Youth Award this year is a group called World's Youth for Climate Justice. And so if you have something that we can drop in the chat, I would appreciate. I'm sorry I didn't give it to you earlier, but if you just Google World's Youth for Climate Justice and take a look at the video there, and you'll see the similarities to the very first OPPOSA intergenerational moot court. And Tony would say, that was exactly what he had in mind, is to have the next generations take over that initiative, to inspire them to pursue this. And it's also part of the just say yes. I get a call asking if I will go speak in Vanuatu to the Pacific Island students fighting climate change. So of course I do. And Justice Wilson asked me to participate in meetings with the Final Stand, the amazing group of students that he works with in Jindal Global Law School and other institutions, doing their work within India, and the folks in the Philippines that are working on I Am Climate Justice. And they were recognized with this Basel Award. And so that's part of what we try to do at the Environmental Law Program. And we've had the good fortune of getting a couple of summer fellows from Stanford University to work with us. So if Keona Blanks is still with us, she's not in Eva Beach right now, though. Are you in Osaka on leave?
I'm in Osaka.
Okay, please. Welcome.
Yeah. All right, aloha mai kakou, everyone. And my warmest congratulations to Professor Forman for this monumental achievement. My name is Keona, and I'm a rising sophomore at Stanford University. Last summer, well, I'm in Osaka right now, doing a gap year. And in this gap year, I'm working at the Institute for Climate and Peace in Hawaii, which you may have heard of. But yeah, it's just been a great opportunity to reconnect with the Japanese side of my family here in Osaka, while exploring my interest in environmental work in Hawaii. So anyway, last summer I had the great opportunity, the great pleasure of working with Professor Forman and the rest of the ELP family here today. Hi, Professor Antolini, Wallsgrove, Joe, Hoku, Hannah, the team, everyone here. And yeah, I worked at the environmental law program as a fellow. And the way it all happened, so Professor Forman and I go way back. It was January 2020 when the world was still normal. And I was searching for an environmentally focused fellowship opportunity in Hawaii for the summer, because I wanted to be home for the summer and also work. And so I looked up environmental like organizations just on the internet, and I found ELP. And I sent a cold email to Professor Forman asking about opportunities at ELP. And to my delight, he responded the same day, actually. And to no surprise, now that I know David and his email skills, and he responded with enthusiasm and aloha. And from there, he helped me to craft a fellowship opportunity centered around our mutual interests, engaging young people in climate action. And so in my 10-week fellowship last summer, my goal was to implement the Iucn's youth-centered motion throughout Hawaii, which I worked to do in a number of ways, and I'll share a few of those. So the first one is I presented the motion at a panel at the 2020 Hawaii Conservation Conference. And in that presentation, I urged the Hawaii Hui members to vote in favor of its adoption and to sort of just like spread the word about it. The second is I wrote a culturally relevant environmental mock trial program for the Richardson Law and Justice High School program, and that was really fun. And I also, the third one is I got to work with the World's Youth for Climate Change, for Climate Justice, the org that Professor Forman was just mentioning. And finally, the most memorable opportunity that I had was organizing the Youth Climate Justice Colloquium with two renowned climate justice activists, two youth in Hawaii, Kavika Pegram and Dyson Chi. And it was just a really wonderful opportunity. I became great friends with them. We still talk. And yeah, it was a well-attended official side event at the 2020 Hawaii Conservation Conference. And it was on environmental racism in Hawaii. And I actually have the link here if you want to see the recording on YouTube. Yeah, and so thanks to this fellowship, I've become a much more active and informed member of my home community. Even now from Japan, like I'm still working at an environmental organization in Hawaii. And I've come away from this experience, again, not only with a deepened understanding of climate and environmental justice movements happening in my own backyard, but also with two dear friends, Kavika and Dyson, the youth I mentioned, and also the ELP family community. And so with that, Professor Forman, I want to say like you're the type of author who doesn't just write books about issues, but you clearly take action and truly imbue your work with the passion and strategy necessary to make institutional change with ELP, for example. And this change is also sustained change because as Professor Forman mentioned, there's another Stanford student here who is considering, she's a prospective youth engagement fellow at the ELP this coming summer. So the same fellowship. And this is because ELP is now on the list of organizations that Stanford University's Haas Center funds students to work at. So that's really exciting. And with that, I once again congratulate David, and I want to pass it on to Jessica, who's that other Stanford student. to say a few words.
Thank you so much. And we're proud to claim you as part of the ELP Ohana. Thank you. Thank you, Kiana.
Thank you so
Jessica.
much. That was a great introduction. And I'm so happy to be here. Congratulations, David. This was such an amazing event. And I'm so happy I could be here to support you. And, you know, this is just such an amazing opportunity to be a part and to be part of like the ELP internship. I never thought that, you know, in high school, I would have an opportunity to actually like, you know, be engaged within the process of environmental action. But clearly you've been so welcoming to me. And like Kiana was saying, I can totally see how, you know, it's easy for professionals to say that they care about youth engagement and recognize that youth engagement is important, but it's a completely different thing for someone to actually take action and to really be involved and be like, to actually want you to be engaged in these types of processes. And I can tell that you are definitely that type of person. And I've had the time of my life just constructing this abstract proposal for the Hawaii Conservation Congress, which you have given me the opportunity to do. So I'm infinitely grateful to you for that. And yeah, I'm so excited to be a fellow this summer and to work more with you and with the ELP family. So thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So there you go, next gen. So if you got any kids that want to get involved in environment, you know, you can send them to Keona and Jessica first, or just send them straight to me. We'd really be excited to create those opportunities. So again, really, thanks everyone so much for spending the time. We'll try to do some fellowship and Q&A if Nick can stick around, but that's really the end of our program. I just want to check with the ELPRAs to see if Zach Galifianakis is here. As I find myself between two ferns, maybe not. If that went over your head, just Google it. Okay, thank you so much. I think that concludes. We can stop the recording and we can stay on and chat.